Imagine a tiger pacing back and forth in its enclosure. Same path, same steps, over and over and over again, for hours. It's not hunting. It's not exploring. It's just walking the exact same line until the ground beneath it wears down into a track. Now imagine a parrot that has plucked out every single feather it can reach, leaving its own chest bare and raw. Or a dog that spins in circles, chasing a tail that was removed years ago. Or an elephant that rocks side to side endlessly, like a person lost in their own head. These aren't random behaviors. Scientists have a name for them, and they look disturbingly similar to something we usually only talk about in humans. So here's the question. Can an animal actually lose its mind? Can a creature go insane the same way a person can? And if so, what does that say about the inner lives of the animals around us? Let's start with what we actually mean by insane, because it's a messy word even for humans. In animals, scientists don't really use the term insanity. They talk about abnormal behavior, psychological distress, and something called stereotypies. Those repetitive, pointless, almost robotic movements you see in stressed animals. The pacing, the rocking, the self-harm, the endless repetition. And here's the unsettling part. These behaviors almost never appear in the wild. A wild tiger doesn't pace a perfect line for hours. A wild parrot doesn't rip out its own feathers. These behaviors show up overwhelmingly in one specific situation: captivity. When you take an intelligent animal and put it in an environment that gives it nothing to do, no space, no stimulation, no control over its own life, something starts to break down. The animal's mind, built for a complex world, gets trapped in an empty one, and it responds in ways that look a lot like mental illness. Take zoochosis. That's the informal term for the psychological damage seen in captive animals. Big cats are some of the most affected. In the wild, a tiger might roam across territory dozens of kilometers wide. Put that same animal in a concrete box, and its brain has nowhere to go. So it paces. The pacing isn't random. It's the animal's nervous system desperately trying to perform behaviors it was designed for, with nowhere to direct them. Elephants are even more heartbreaking. They're deeply social, deeply intelligent, and they have long memories. Captive elephants have been observed swaying and rocking for hours, a behavior almost never seen in wild herds. Some researchers compare it to the self-soothing rocking seen in severely traumatized humans. And then there are the cases that go beyond repetitive movement into something that looks like genuine breakdown. There are documented cases of animals that stop eating, withdraw completely, refuse to interact, and show every outward sign of what we would call depression in a person. In fact, depression in animals is now widely accepted by scientists. Dogs can show it. Cats can show it. Studies on rats and mice have been used for decades to test human antidepressants, precisely because these animals display measurable depression-like states. Learned helplessness, loss of appetite, withdrawal, lack of motivation. If those drugs work on the animal's brain, it strongly suggests the animal's brain can enter something genuinely similar to human depression. But here's where it gets philosophically strange. To call something a mental illness, you usually need a mind complex enough to break in that particular way. A rock can't go insane. A worm probably can't either. So the very fact that an animal can develop something like depression or trauma tells you something important. It tells you there's a mind in there sophisticated enough to be wounded. And trauma might be the clearest example of all. Animals can absolutely be traumatized. A dog that was abused will often flinch at raised hands for the rest of its life. Elephants that witnessed their families killed by poachers have shown behavior researchers directly compared to post-traumatic stress disorder. aggression, hypervigilance, abnormal startle responses, even what looks like flashbacks. In one striking pattern, young elephants who lost their mothers and grew up without older elephants to guide them became unusually violent later in life. Entire groups of orphaned males started attacking other animals, including rhinos, for no clear survival reason. When older bull elephants were finally introduced, the violence dropped dramatically. It was as if the young elephants had grown up broken and simply needed stability to heal. That's not just instinct misfiring. That looks like the long shadow of trauma shaping behavior across years. Now let's talk about anxiety, because this one might be living in your house right now. Separation anxiety in dogs is extremely well documented. Some dogs, when left alone, don't just feel a little sad. They panic. They destroy furniture. They howl for hours. They injure themselves trying to escape. Their heart rate spikes. Their stress hormones flood their system. This isn't bad behavior. It's a genuine anxiety disorder, and vets treat it with the same kinds of medication used for humans. Cats develop compulsive behaviors too. Over-grooming until they create bald patches, obsessive pacing. Some cats develop a strange condition where they suddenly attack their own tails as if the tail were an enemy. Even birds, especially highly intelligent ones like parrots, are notorious for psychological problems in captivity. Parrots are wild animals with the emotional and intellectual needs of a small child. Lock that mind in a cage with nothing to do, and it can develop screaming fits, feather plucking, and self-mutilation. Some parrots in bad conditions essentially fall apart. So why does this happen? Why are intelligent animals so vulnerable to mental breakdown? The answer seems to be a cruel kind of trade-off. The same intelligence that makes an animal adaptable, curious, and emotionally rich also makes it fragile. A simple mind in a boring box might be fine. A complex mind in a boring box suffers. The bigger the brain, the more there is to break. This is why the animals most prone to these problems are almost always the smart ones. Primates, elephants, dolphins, parrots, dogs. The very traits we admire, intelligence, emotion, social bonding, are the same traits that allow these animals to be psychologically harmed. There's even evidence in dolphins, who in captivity sometimes show self-destructive behavior, refusing to surface to breathe, which, for a dolphin, is a voluntary act. Some researchers have controversially suggested this can resemble a kind of giving up. Whether that's truly comparable to human despair is hotly debated. But the fact that scientists are even having that debate tells you how far the question goes. So, can animals go insane? Not in the dramatic, human, movie sense, but in the deeper, more uncomfortable sense. Yes, animals can be traumatized. They can become anxious, depressed, compulsive, and broken. Their minds can be damaged by suffering in ways that look remarkably like our own. And maybe that's the real lesson here. For a long time, we told ourselves that mental illness was proof of how complex and special the human mind is. But it might be the opposite. The capacity to suffer, to break, to lose yourself might not be a uniquely human flaw at all. It might be the price of having a mind worth breaking. And the animals around us may be paying it far more often than we ever realize.